Top Sales Strategies 2025, Outsourcing Edition. Why Outbound feels harder in 2025. Outbound in 2025 isn't dead, but it is unforgiving. Buyers do more research without talking to a rep. They move faster between channels, and they have very little patience for generic messaging. Gartner found 61% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free experience, and 73% actively avoid suppliers that send irrelevant outreach. So low-quality volume doesn't just underperform, it damages your brand. At the same time, leadership still expects pipeline growth. That creates a tough equation. You need more top-of-funnel coverage, but the tolerance for mistakes is lower than ever. Whether you're evaluating a cold email agency, a cold calling agency, or a broader B2B sales agency, the bar is no longer book meetings. It's create sales-accepted opportunities without burning trust. This is the context for modern sales outsourcing and outsourced SDR teams. The best teams we see aren't outsourcing because it's trendy. They're outsourcing because it's a practical way to add coverage, speed, and specialization while keeping strategy and closing power in-house. The rest of this guide breaks down how to make that model work in the real world. Why sales outsourcing became a core GTM lever. First, buying behavior is now digital-first and hybrid by default. Gartner has projected that by 2025, 80% of B2B sales interactions will occur in digital channels, which means your outreach has to be coordinated across email, phone, and platforms like LinkedIn, not run as isolated campaigns. A modern SDR agency that can execute omni-channel matters more than one that simply promises activity volume. Second, the outsourcing category itself has matured into a mainstream go-to-market option. Business Research Insights projects the global B2B sales outsourcing services market will grow from $105.39 billion in 2024 to $216.27 billion by 2033. And Data Horizon Research estimates the U.S. outsourced sales services market was about $14.2 billion in 2024. That doesn't happen unless buyers, meaning sales leaders, are seeing repeatable outcomes. Third, specialization is now the advantage. Great outbound requires deliverability discipline, segmentation, list-building services, coaching, and tight feedback loops. Work that many teams don't want to rebuild internally every time they hire SDRs. Sales outsourcing works when it's treated as a specialized extension of your revenue engine, not a cheap substitute for it. Build versus buy, the economics behind the decision. If you're deciding whether to hire SDRs or outsource sales development, the economics are usually the first checkpoint. Outbound Sales Pro estimates a fully loaded in-house SDR seat costs about $12,010 a month per productive rep once you account for compensation, benefits, tools, management, and operations support. That number is before you factor in the time and risk involved in getting the person productive. Time is the hidden cost most teams underestimate. Sales development reps take about 3.2 months to reach full productivity on average, and industry analysis based on Bridge Group benchmarks suggests roughly 40% annual SDR attrition. In other words, you're paying for ramp, then you're paying again to refill the seat, often before you fully compounded the learning from the last rep. The takeaway isn't that outsourcing is always cheaper. It's that outsourcing can be lower risk and faster to stabilize when you need coverage now. If you treat an outsourced sales team like a measurable pipeline lever, benchmarked against cost per qualified meeting and cost per opportunity, you can make a build versus buy decision with data instead of gut feel. What to outsource and what to keep in-house. The best 2025 sales strategy is almost always hybrid. In-house teams stay focused on high-leverage conversations, while an outsourced sales team scales repeatable top-of-funnel execution. In practice, Outsourcing tends to work best for list building, cold email execution, cold call services, first pass qualification, and appointment setting. Areas where process and consistency matter as much as talent. That's why many high-performing outbound sales agency models look more like pods than individual contractors. What should stay in-house is your narrative and your judgment. ICP definition, positioning, pricing, and how you want to win in the market. It also typically includes enterprise and strategic account ownership, where multi-threading and internal context are critical. Outsourced SDRs can open doors and run coordinated outreach, but your internal AEs should own account strategy and the relationships that carry 6- and 7-figure deals across the line. One mistake we see repeatedly is outsourcing before you've validated a clear ICP and message. If you hand any sales development agency a broad list and a vague pitch, they will scale confusion, often fast, creating more noise in a market that already punishes irrelevance. The right approach is to validate one repeatable motion internally or in a tightly scoped pilot, and then outsource the execution to scale that proven play. Don't outsource your mess. Outsource what's already working, then instrument it so you can scale quality without losing control. How to make outsourcing perform: quality, not volume. In 2025, the biggest predictor of outsourcing success is whether you force quality through structure. SalesHive reports average B2B cold email reply rates around 5.1% and a dial-to-meeting benchmark around 2.3%, which means you don't have margin for sloppy targeting. Your cold calling services and email programs need tight segmentation, credible personalization, and consistent follow-up, not spray and pray. Operationally, treat outsourced SDRs like an extension of your team. That means shared pipeline reviews, access to call recordings, and direct exposure to product updates so they sound like you, not like a vendor. When our clients integrate an outsourced SDR agency into the same weekly cadence they use for internal reps, meeting quality improves because coaching and feedback happen fast. Commercially, pay attention to incentives and definitions. If you compensate purely on hours or activity, you'll get activity. If you compensate on outcomes with clear qualification rules, you'll get pipeline. Define what counts as a qualified meeting: role, pain, urgency, timeline, and fit. Require clean handoff notes and make replacement policies explicit so your AEs aren't stuck cleaning up unqualified calendars. Common outsourcing mistakes that kill ROI. Optimizing for the cheapest seat is one of the fastest ways to waste budget. Low-cost providers often rely on bloated lists and generic scripts, which is exactly what buyers punish. Remember, 73% of buyers avoid suppliers that send irrelevant outreach. If you want the best cold calling services or a cold email agency that protects your brand, you're buying targeting, training, and management rigor, not just time. Treating the provider as a black box is the next failure mode. Without transparent reporting, you can't see whether performance issues come from list quality, deliverability, talk tracks, or qualification drift. Require that every touch is logged into your CRM, that you have visibility into copy and sequences, and that the partner participates in stand-ups so you can iterate together instead of arguing after results plateau. Finally, one generic outbound play across all segments usually collapses engagement. SMB, mid-market, and enterprise prospects respond to different triggers and value framing, and they often need different channel mixes. For example, more B2B cold calling services in one segment and more research-driven email in another. Segment the ICP, tailor messaging by persona, and let your outsourced sales team run controlled experiments so you can scale what's working instead of scaling assumptions. Instrumentation, KPIs, dashboards, and a 90-day pilot. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, especially with sales outsourcing. Before onboarding any SDR agencies or cold calling companies, define a simple metrics stack: reply rate, connect rate, meetings booked per 1,000 prospects, show rate, and opportunity rate per meeting. Then baseline those numbers from your current motion so you can compare in-house versus outsourced performance without bias. We recommend a time-boxed 90-day pilot with clear go, no-go criteria. The goal isn't just meetings, it's sales-accepted opportunities that your AEs would want more of. When you commit to a measurable pilot, you can evaluate a sales agency on outcomes, tighten targeting, and adjust the channel mix before you scale spend or add seats. Instrumentation also forces the right conversations internally. Instead of debating whether to hire SDRs or outsource sales based on anecdotes, you can evaluate cost per qualified meeting, cost per opportunity, and time to pipeline. Given in-house ramp averages around 3.2 months, speed to impact becomes part of ROI, not an afterthought. Advanced optimization for cold calling and email programs. Once the basics are working, the fastest gains come from tightening inputs rather than pushing more volume. On the email side, that's deliverability discipline, controlled sending, and iterative messaging tests at the subject line and opener level. On the calling side, it's list hygiene, better time blocking, and coaching on the first 10 seconds of the conversation. Because real-world connect rates don't reward wasted intros. Treat personalization as a system, not a one-off effort. High-performing teams build a library of persona-specific talk tracks, proof points, and objections, then refine them weekly based on real responses. This is where a mature sales development agency or cold calling agency stands out. They bring repeatable operations for testing and tuning, not just reps making best guesses. Finally, keep the handoff tight. High show rates and strong opportunity conversion usually come down to simple execution. Clean qualification notes, clear next step expectations, and reminders that reduce no-shows. If your outsourced SDR pod is booking meetings, but your opportunity rate per meeting is weak, your best lever is usually qualification criteria and handoff process, not more outreach. What smart sales leaders will do next. As outsourcing grows, again, the market is projected from $105.39 billion in 2024 to $216.27 billion by 2033. Selection and management become the differentiator. The winners will be the teams that choose partners the same way they choose internal leaders: clear expectations, clear metrics, and a clear operating cadence. In practical terms, that means you pick an outsourced SDR team that can show transparency, consistent process, and measurable pipeline impact. You should also expect the full service model to keep taking share from simple staff augmentation. When you're evaluating an outbound sales agency, look for the supporting infrastructure: data, operations, QA, enablement, and reporting, because that's what creates consistency across reps and over time. At SalesHive, we've seen the strongest outcomes when clients treat the partner as a true extension of the revenue org, with shared dashboards and fast feedback loops from AEs. If you're deciding whether to hire SDRs later, or outsource sales now, start with a single ICP and a measurable pilot. Build a shared playbook, integrate activity into your CRM, and review performance weekly against outcomes, not activity. That's how you turn sales outsourcing into a strategic growth lever instead of a gamble.